Before we can get going with the WCF service and type in some code here, we need to understand a few basic ABCs about Windows Communication Foundation, WCF. WCF needs to have an address. It also needs to have a binding, and it also needs to have a contract. So what do each one of these things mean? An address is the location of where the web service might be located. In this example, we maybe have it on a website / mywebservice.svc. SVC is the extension of the web service. Then we're also going to have the binding. The binding is actually how are we going to communicate over the wire. It's going to be HTTP, MSMQ, or is it going to be some other type of binding, TCP, etc. There's many different bindings. We won't be able to get into all of them today. There's a contract. What are we going to talk about when we're over the wire? We can talk, we can basic strings or integers or longs, etc. We can talk back and forth with those, but we can also talk with complex types. For example, we may be talking to a web service that provides information about some trouble tickets, or a help desk web service. And then in this example, we may be working with a type called ticket data, which may have some information about a ticket data. The best way to understand this is just think about when we have a problem with a computer or someone needs to contact technical support for some reason. You need to call technical support. So what do you need to initiate this conversation and communicate back and forth? You need to have an address of their phone number that you can dial to reach them. So this is the same thing in WCF. You need an address. You need a binding. How are you going to communicate over the wire? You need to talk English. So if you talk English, the technical support representatives need to talk English, speak English as well. Then you're going to need the contract. And this is the contract of what are you going to be talking about. In this instance, you're going to be talking about technical support. Again, this is a general term, but it helps solidify the example. So again, an address, binding, and a contract. These are the ABCs of WCF. So let's go ahead and create a simple WCF service. File, New Project. We're going to go to Web. We're going to see WCF Application. What we're going to do is we're going to create a basic service called Player Stats Service. This service is going to give us some basic information about a player, be it a NFL player, be it a Xbox player, etc. But this web service would normally provide information about players and retrieve statistics about them. When Visual Studio creates the WCF application, it gives us the web.config, which provides some configuration information about WCF, a service.svc file, and an iservice.cs file. This is the interface, and this is the actual service itself. We're in the code behind at this point right now, which is the service 1, and you can see a couple implementations, composite types, etc. Let's go look at the interface because where all the meat of everything happens. We have a couple of attributes we want to take a look at. Service attribute, service contract, operation contract, data contract, and data member. The service contract attribute defines where the service is, what it is. And in this case we're stating whoever implements iService1 is going to be a service. It's going to have an operation contract, which are the operations that this service can perform. This is going to be similar to the web method back in the ASMX technologies. Then you have data contract. You normally can pass over the wire primitive type, string, integer, long, etc. No problem. But what happens if you need to pass a complex type over the wire? You actually need to provide some attributes to that class, and that's going to be data contract. This is a contract to be going over the wire. And you also need to specify which members of that class you want to pass over the wire by using the data member attribute. So let's go ahead and implement a couple different operations here. Let me delete this because I'm going to create a new one from scratch, a new type. We'll delete that as well. We're going to rename the service to iPlayer Stats, the interface, excuse me. We're going to have ReadSharper do this for us. iPlayer Stats service. It's going to ask us to rename the comments. That's fine. It'll take a second. Okay, it's done. Let's change the name of this method to getPlayerName. What this is going to do is just take an integer, and we can just say that this is going to be the player's ID right here. That's going to be the player ID. And maybe we'll have another operation on here that says we want to have it return a player statistics object about a player. So get player stats is maybe the method name, and it's int player ID. No problem. We're also going to need an operation contract on here because we want to expose this to the end user. So let's create that class. We'll have a resharper do that for us. Inside of this we may want to have return a points system. Maybe it's just integer based. And then maybe we also want to have a integer based rank system as well. Since this is something we want to pass over the wire with WCF, we're going to need to provide a data contract attribute. And then we want these to go over the wire as well as part of this class. So we're going to put data members on there. So let's go back to our service1.svc file. We're going to see here that our methods have not been implemented as all of them have not been. So let's implement the other one. Now normally what we would do in this location is connect to some database or business layer, etc. to get some data. But at this point in time we can't really connect because we don't have a lot of time to write all those layers. What we'll do is do the same thing down here. We'd normally connect to a DB, the business layer, etc. whatever. But in this case we're just going to return a player statistic object here. We'll just use the object initializers in C#. So let's say this guy has 9,932 points and his rank is 33. And maybe this is his worldwide rank of 33rd in the world. Now let's rename the service as well. Player stats service. It's going to ask us to rename the comments. Yes, please do. Let's go look at the web config, because what's going to happen in here is we have to rename some things in the web config too. The web config usually drops all the configuration for WCF at the bottom, and it's going to be under the system.service model. Here we'll see that the service is player stat service. .service1 is its name. Let's rename that to player stat service .player stat service, because that's what it should be. Yeah, that's right. It should be. And then we're going to see right here that we have the behavior, which is located down here, which is the name, which we can leave it at that, so we don't have to change that. The contracts need to get changed though, because the contract is actually going to be iPlayer stat service. Again, you can see the A, the B, the C here, the address, the binding, the contract. Address is blank because it's going to default to wherever the service host is. In this case, a service host is where WCF hosts a service. Right now it's getting hosted inside of IIS. The binding is just HTTP, WS HTTP, and there's a couple other bindings. Again, don't have time to get into them today, but you can take a look at them. Basically just think that we're going over HTTP. In the contract, how are we going to be communicating back and forth the operations, how are we going to be and what are we going to be talking about. We also have another endpoint that's down here, and this is the metadata exchange. This provides metadata about the service so you can generate proxies, etc. Now let's go ahead and build this. See if the build succeeded down here. Now if we actually were to try to fire this up, we're going to get an error. It's going to actually modify the web.config for debugging, and the error we're going to receive is because the service host is still set up to look for a different service, which we're going to see here in a second. Whoops, we didn't set our default file. Set our default start page. Let's start that again. See here, service 1 provided in the service attribute for the service host cannot be found. Here's the simple fix. You got to go into the .svc file and view the markup. And you're going to see up here that this actually needs to get changed to player stat service, because again, service 1 doesn't exist anymore. Oh, what if we want to rename this too? Let's just rename that. Let's say it's called this player stat service. So let's change this to player stats svc. There we go. Set this as a start page again, and let's fire it up. Now here's this player stat service. At this point your web service is up and running. It's ready to return data. People can connect to the WSDL, right, which is located right here. You can see it, and generate their proxies. Then you can also generate a proxy to give to them using the svc-util command, which we don't have time to get into today, but utilizing the add service reference will essentially do the same thing. But what we can do to see if the service is still working is to invoke it. Now normally we would be able to do this through an invoke method on the old ASMX web services, but what Microsoft's provided us with in this case is a WCF test client, and that's located in the Program Files Visual Studio Common 7 IDE. So you can just double click the test client, and then you can say add service, And we can just go ahead and click OK. And what this is going to do is going to look at the service data, service metadata, and generate a proxy, which was our metadata value that we saw in our web.config. And now it's generated a proxy inside of its own little application here. We can say execute certain methods on it. So it's going to take a player ID, and the value is going to be whatever value. So let's type 777. We're going to get a warning when we try to invoke it, stating that we're sending information over the wire. No problem. Wait a few seconds. It's got to wire everything up. Now it returns back Donn. Great. That's what we wanted. Player stats. So let's return, type in some other values. 665. Again, warning, no problem. It's going to return us a player stats service dot player statistics type with these two values in it. Let's look at our code again. There's the value, 9932 and 33. 9932 and 33. Set some breakpoints here just so you can see that it's actually going into the service and not mocking anything out. Let's type this in. Is it 7777? So 4 sevens. What's the ID? 7777. Great. Returns back what we want. What about the player name? 33. Invoke. There's 33. Turns back Donn. Let's type in 77. Invoke. Okay? It's going to return back Donn again. Great. Now you've actually seen how to create a WCF service from scratch. I hope this helps, and until next time, good luck.